Julian Assange's case sets many precedents. It sets precedents in relation to the suppression of dissent. It sets precedents in relation to the extraterritorial reach of the US state, persecuting a non-US citizen for committing the crime of journalism outside of the US. It sets precedents for freedom of speech and the rights of whistleblowers. It also sets precedents for state-sponsored torture and the collusion of different states to attack one individual. Today we are gathered, of course, to discuss some of the legal aspects of the case. And in doing so, it is my pleasure to welcome someone who has given a lifetime to a vision of a fairer and more just society. She's a fraud prosecutor who nailed oil giant Aquitaine when they were committing grossly inappropriate corrupt transactions. She's been someone with a commitment to green politics and sustainable development. She chaired the Development Committee of Parliament, of the European Parliament, the Development Committee of the European Parliament. She's a member of the committee she was a member of the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, and she was also on the delegation for relationships with Afghanistan. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Madame Eva Joly.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being here. Julian Assange must not be extradited, and only a very massive mobilization of ordinary people and also of people from the law community can stop it, because it has been programmed for years that he should be extradited. He should not be extradited, first of all, for legal reasons, because in order to be extradited, you need what we call double incrimination. It must be a crime in the two countries. And publishing information that is of public interest is not a crime here in the UK. There is no proof whatsoever that Julian has never ever penetrated the system of the American army. They don't have any proof of that. So they tried to get him extradited on charges of violation of Espionage Act, which is quite extraordinary. It is a violation of the double incrimination rule. That should not happen. And if we let that happen, that means that we will allow the United States to have extraterritorial competence, meaning that it is for the US to decide what is contrary to their security interest. And that we cannot have. We cannot have a position where they should decide what we can publish and not. And this is not a joke, because we have seen it in other areas. Today, they have a very powerful legislation, anti-corruption legislation. They call it the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And this law, or the way they have interpreted it, and we have not resisted, is that as long as an American interest is involved, they feel they take the case, meaning that if you have a corruption case between Angola and France, and that they had dollar transactions, people are prosecuted in the US. And this has been a terrible weapon to weaken the European industry. And I'm very happy about prosecution for corruption, but when you look at the cases, you see also that it is a political tool, and we have not been able to withstand it. And it will be exactly the same thing if we allow this to happen. That is the end of investigative journalism in Europe, and we cannot let that happen. That is maybe the main reason for our democracies not to let this happen. There is another condition for extradition, that is to be sure that there will be a fair trial. And we are sure of the contrary. We are sure that there will be no fair trial because of the sayings of people, because of what Donald Trump has declared, but also Hillary Clinton. They have been very excessive in their declaration, saying that he merits for Donald Trump death penalties, and this has been very violent also in the Senate. So we know that he is hatred, and we know that he has been spied upon by the CIA when he was in the embassy, and that this spying has violated his fundamental rights, his right to privacy, and his right to have private conversation with his lawyers, because they were also spied upon. But the most extraordinary thing is that the Spanish company who did the surveillance in the embassy, which was called UC Undercover Global, they had a direct link to Donald Trump. So this is not possible. It is not possible. And the situation has been very difficult for Assange since the beginning. I want to talk a little bit about that. It is because of Sweden, because of the reputation of Sweden as being the home country for human rights. But that is a long time ago, because as a member of the European Parliament, as a member of the Commission on the Liberté, I have participated in the inquiry on the secret prisons of the CIA in Europe. You know that they were in Poland, they were in Romania, where they practiced torture, and these secret flights, they stopped at Arlanda airport. The Swedish allowed that to happen. And I want to get back a little bit how I personally got to understand the situation of Assange, because I have kind of life principle in my life that you should do what you can for the people around you. And I happened to meet with Assange when he worked in Iceland, and I too. I was working on the banking crisis, and he was working on a very interesting project that was to create a heaven for journalists where there are no libel suits, no injunctions in Iceland. And we met to try to set that up, and that was in 2009. And when later I discovered that he was in the embassy, I thought that my duty was to go and see him and meet with him and see what I could do. And I came to understand that something was very wrong, because the Swedish prosecution authorities, and that was a woman called Marianne Nie, she pretended, and she even wrote on her blog, on her internet page, that it was not possible for her to go to London to interrogate, to conduct an interview with Assange. And as a judge and as an investigative magistrate, I knew that that was totally bullshit, that this is a very ordinary thing. And I'm a very practical person, so I thought maybe she has not followed her classes. Maybe she's not updated. Maybe something happened. I have to go and tell her. And I did. But she didn't want to meet with me. But I met with a lot of other people. And I made press conferences. And I said exactly this. This is not normal. It is easy to do. We do it every day. And that was a very strong signal that something was wrong. At that time, I didn't know. I hadn't decided yet in my head whether it was manipulation of the US authorities or whether she was, sometimes you get stuck. So my request at that time was that as the investigation was stuck, she should be taken off the investigation, as she has done this tremendous error, and the investigation should be taken over by somebody else. That didn't happen. Now we know why. We really know why. Grassa, due to the access to document law they have in Sweden, and to an Italian journalist, I think, who used it and got access to the file and found the interferences, found traces of calls with the FBI and extraordinary mails from this country, from the Prosecution Service, saying, don't you dare get code feeds. This is not an ordinary extradition case. We have all the proofs. This is not an ordinary extradition case. This is a political case. They have worked on it for years, and they are about to succeed, because the political situation is very dangerous for Assange, because Boris Johnson, he needs good support from the US. He wants a very good deal. And maybe Assange is part of the prize, as he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, where they put up a deal. We don't know what that deal is, but there is a deal. So I want to say to the UK authorities, we are watching you. The international community is watching you. And if you dare extradite Julian Assange, it is in your dishonor.